She walked into his office with enough evidence to destroy him, but when he smiled and said, "I've been waiting for you, Miss Chen," she realized she might have just walked into her trap. In the ruthless world of high finance and investigative journalism, some secrets are worth killing for and some are worth dying to protect. When brilliant journalist Ava Chen discovers evidence that could topple billionaire Ethan Kross's empire, she thinks she's found the story of a lifetime. But Ethan has been playing a different game entirely, one where the stakes aren't just money or reputation, they're everything that matters. What begins as a battle between truth and power becomes something far more dangerous, a collision of two souls who recognize something in each other that they've never found anywhere else. In a world where everyone has a price, what happens when two people discover that love might be the only thing that can't be bought or sold? This is a story about the compromises we make to survive, the prices we pay for our choices, and the extraordinary courage it takes to trust someone with the power to destroy you. Because sometimes the greatest risk isn't in keeping your secrets, it's in revealing them to the one person who could either save you or ruin you completely. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, have you ever had to choose between doing what's right and protecting someone you love? What would you compromise to save the people who matter most to you? Hi my beautiful family, I have missed you all, thank you so much for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. The fluorescent lights of the Chronicle newsroom buzzed like angry wasps at 2:47 a.m., casting harsh shadows across Ava Chen's determined face. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, having escaped from the neat bun she'd started with 12 hours ago. Empty coffee cups formed a protective fortress around her laptop, and scattered documents covered every inch of her desk like pieces of a puzzle she was desperate to solve. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the financial records spread before her, not from exhaustion though she'd been running on 3 hours of sleep for the past week, but from the electricity of discovery. The numbers didn't lie. Kross Industries' meteoric rise wasn't just impressive, it was impossible. Unless, Jesus, she whispered, her voice barely audible in the empty newsroom. The pattern was there, hidden beneath layers of shell companies and offshore accounts, but undeniable once you knew how to look. Ethan Kross, the golden boy of Wall Street, the philanthropist who graced magazine covers and charity galas, had built his empire on something rotten. The photo on her desk caught her eye, Emma's graduation picture, radiant in her cap and gown before everything went wrong. Before the charges, before the lawyers who cost more than their childhood home was worth. Before their parents aged 10 years in 6 months, watching their youngest daughter face a potential prison sentence for a crime. Ava still wasn't sure she'd committed. One more month, Ava thought, her chest tightening. One more month, Ava thought, her chest tightening. Emma's trial was in 4 weeks, and their last hope for a decent defense attorney required a retainer fee that might as well have been $1 million. This story, if she could prove it, would be front-page material for months. The kind of exposé that won Pulitzers and, more importantly, paid enough to save her sister. She pulled up Kross's corporate headshot on her screen. Even in a professional photo, Ethan Kross looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, sharp jawline, piercing blue eyes, and the kind of confident smile that promised he'd never met a problem he couldn't solve with enough money. At 34, he was everything Ava had been taught to distrust: wealthy, powerful, and completely untouchable. Or so he thought. Her phone buzzed, a text from Emma, "Can't sleep, scared about tomorrow's deposition. Love you big sister." Ava's jaw clenched. She'd been protecting Emma since they were kids, taking the blame for broken vases and missed curfews. This was no different. Emma was brilliant, kind, and naive. She'd never survive prison. Not when Ava could prevent it. "I've got you," she murmured to Emma's photo, then turned back to her laptop. Tomorrow she'd request an interview with Cross Industries. She'd walk into that gleaming tower, look Ethan Cross in the eye, and watch his perfect world crumble. 50 floors above the city, Ethan Cross stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the lights of New York twinkle like fallen stars. The city never slept, and neither did he, not anymore. Sleep brought dreams, and dreams brought memories he'd spent 5 years and billions of dollars trying to forget. The Macallan 25 in his crystal tumbler had gone warm an hour ago, but he held it anyway, finding comfort in the weight of something solid in his hands. His reflection in the glass looked tired, older than his 34 years. The magazines called him a genius, a visionary, a man who'd revolutionized green technology. They had no idea what he'd done to earn that reputation. Behind him, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Cross, the final reports from the Shanghai project are on your desk. Also, security flagged another journalist inquiry, and Ava Chen from the Chronicle. Should I route it to PR?" Ethan's grip tightened on the tumbler. He'd been expecting this call for months, ever since the whispers started. Someone was digging, following a trail he'd thought was buried deep enough to stay hidden forever. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built his fortune on clean energy, on the promise of a better tomorrow, but his foundation was built on a lie that had cost 3 lives. "No," he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm building in his chest. "Send it to me directly." "Sir?" "All of it. Her background, her recent stories, her financial situation, everything." As his assistant disconnected, Ethan moved to his desk, a massive piece of reclaimed wood that had cost more than most people made in a year. The Shanghai reports could wait. If Ava Chen was as good as her reputation suggested, he needed to know exactly what he was dealing with. Her photo popped up on his screen, LinkedIn profile, professional but not polished. She was beautiful in an understated way, with intelligent dark eyes and the kind of determined expression that suggested she'd never back down from a fight. Her articles were impressive: corporate corruption, environmental scandals, politicians who'd forgotten their promises. She had a gift for finding truth in places others never thought to look. His private investigator's preliminary report appeared in his inbox 20 minutes later. The details painted a picture of a woman driven by more than professional ambition. Ava Chen, the younger sister, is facing federal embezzlement charges. Parents are in deep debt from legal fees. Ava Chen wasn't just hunting a story, she was hunting salvation. Ethan's fingers hovered over his keyboard. He could make this disappear. One phone call to the right person, and Ava Chen would find her investigation stonewalled at every turn. Her sister's legal troubles could even be expedited. But something in her eyes, even in the professional headshot, stopped him. She looked like someone who'd understand the weight of impossible choices, someone who'd made sacrifices that kept her awake at night, someone like him. His phone rang. The caller ID made his blood freeze. Marcus Vale, personal, Ethan, my friend. Marcus's voice was warm, familiar, and completely wrong. "I hope you're not working too late. We need to talk." "It's late, Marcus. Can't this wait?" "I'm afraid not. It's about that journalist, the one asking questions about the Meridian project." Ethan's hand clenched around the phone. Marcus had been his business partner, his closest friend, the only person who knew the truth about how Cross Industries had really started. If Marcus was involved, what about her? "Let me handle this, Ethan. You've got too much to lose." Sometimes the best way to silence someone is to give them what they want, just not what they expect. The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone, his mind racing. Marcus had been acting strangely for months, pushing for more control, questioning decisions that had built their empire. If he was planning something, Ethan pulled up Ava Chen's photo again, studying her face. She was walking into a trap, but she didn't know it yet. The question was, would she be the hunter or the prey? His decision crystallized with painful clarity. He opened his secure messaging app and typed a single message to his head of security. Ava Chen, full protection detail, effective immediately. She doesn't know, and she can't know, but keep her safe. Because if Marcus was playing the game Ethan suspected, Ava Chen was about to become the most dangerous woman in New York. Dangerous to Marcus, dangerous to the truth, and most dangerous of all, dangerous to Ethan's carefully constructed walls around his heart. Tomorrow, when she walked into his office armed with evidence and righteous fury, he'd be ready. The question was, would she be ready for what she'd find when she looked into the abyss? The city lights blurred as Ethan finally allowed himself to feel the weight of what was coming. In 24 hours, everything would change. The only question was whether they'd destroy each other or save each other. He suspected it might be both. What do you think? Is Ethan making the right choice by protecting Ava even though she's trying to destroy him? And what about Ava? Should she expose the truth even if it might not save her sister? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Who are you rooting for so far? The rain hammered against Ava's apartment window like accusations she couldn't silence. 3 days had passed since her confrontation with Ethan Cross, and she hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the way his expression had shifted from predatory confidence to something dangerously close to genuine concern when he'd spoken about Emma. She stared at her laptop screen, cursor blinking mockingly at the end of an incomplete sentence. The exposé on Cross Industries sat there, half-written, like a loaded gun she couldn't bring herself to fire. Her phone buzzed. Another text from her editor, Marcus Rivera. Where's the Cross story? Publisher's breathing down my neck. Ava's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could finish it right now. Hit publish. Watch Ethan's empire crumble. But Emma's face haunted her. Her little sister, brilliant and broken, who'd made one terrible mistake that had spiraled into a nightmare. The apartment felt suffocating. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, needing air, needing distance from the choice that was eating her alive. Meanwhile, 53 floors above the city, Ethan Cross stood in his office, staring at the same rain that tormented Ava. His usual armor of expensive suits and calculated calm had developed cracks. For the first time in years he'd met someone who saw through his carefully constructed facade, and instead of fear, he felt something far more dangerous. Respect. And if he was honest with himself, attraction. His assistant knocked. Mr. Cross, the board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Cancel it. Sir? I said cancel it. He turned from the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. And get me everything you can on Emma Chen's case. I want to know every detail. Is this about the journalist? Ethan's jaw tightened. It's about doing the right thing. But even as he said it, he knew it was more complicated than that. Ava Chen had walked into his office with fire in her eyes and evidence in her hands, and she'd left with something of his he hadn't intended to give. His respect, his interest, and maybe something deeper he wasn't ready to name. His phone rang. The caller ID made his blood freeze. Derek Morrison, federal prosecutor. Ethan, we need to talk about Emma Chen. What about her? Someone's been asking questions, making inquiries about her case being dropped. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. Should I? Cut the bullshit, Ethan. I know you've been digging into her background. What's your angle here? Maybe I'm just interested in justice. Derek's laugh was bitter. Justice? From the man who buried the Meridian Project so deep it would take a miracle to find it. What's really going on? The line went dead, leaving Ethan alone with the weight of his choices. He'd underestimated how quickly word would spread, how many people were watching his every move. If he wasn't careful, his attempt to help Emma would only make things worse for everyone involved. Across town, Ava found herself standing outside the federal courthouse, rain soaking through her jacket. She wasn't sure why she'd come here, maybe to feel the weight of the justice she'd always believed in, maybe to understand the system that held her sister's fate in its hands. Her phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. Ava? I just got a call from my lawyer. Someone's been asking questions about my case. Important questions. What kind of questions? the kind that might make this whole nightmare disappear. Emma's voice was shaky with hope. He thinks someone with serious influence is trying to help me. Ava's heart pounded. Emma, listen to me. Don't get your hopes up. These things are complicated. But what if it's real? What if someone is trying to help? After the call ended, Ava stood in the rain, understanding with crystal clarity that Ethan had already begun to fulfill his part of their unspoken bargain. The realization should have made her angry. He was manipulating her, forcing her hand. Instead, she felt something far more unsettling. He was keeping his word. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coffee. We need to talk. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the reply button. Every instinct screamed at her to delete it, to walk away, to choose the righteous path over the right one. But Emma's voice echoed in her mind, filled with the first hope she'd heard in months. Another text arrived. I know what you're thinking, that this is manipulation. Maybe it is. But Emma deserves better than to pay for both our mistakes. Ava closed her eyes, letting the rain wash over her face. When she opened them, she was typing, tomorrow. 8 a.m., Joe's Coffee on 5th Street. And Ethan, if you're lying to me about any of this, I'll destroy you. His response came immediately. I wouldn't expect anything less. As she walked home through the storm, Ava realized she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She'd agreed to meet with the enemy, and worse, she was looking forward to it. The journalist in her knew she should be disgusted with herself. The sister in her whispered that maybe, just maybe, compromise wasn't always surrender. But the woman in her, the part she'd kept locked away for so long, was wondering what it would be like to trust someone who saw all her weaknesses and chose to protect her anyway. The rain kept falling, washing away the last of her certainty, leaving only the dangerous possibility that Ethan Cross might be exactly what she'd never known she needed, an enemy worth saving and a man worth the risk. Tell us in the comments, have you ever found yourself attracted to someone you knew you should stay away from? What happens when your heart and your head are telling you completely different things? Joe's Coffee on 5th Street wasn't the kind of place billionaires usually frequented. The mismatched chairs, chipped mugs, and the smell of burnt espresso made it perfectly anonymous, exactly what Ava had counted on. She arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a corner table where she could watch the door and plan her escape routes. At exactly 8 a.m., Ethan Cross walked in, and every carefully laid plan evaporated from her mind. Gone was the imposing figure in the $1,000 suit. This man wore dark jeans and a simple black sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd run his fingers through it, and without the armor of his corporate persona, he looked younger, more approachable, more dangerous. Miss Chen. He slid into the seat across from her, his movements fluid and confident even in this humble setting. Thank you for coming. Don't thank me yet. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, using it as a shield. I'm here because of Emma, nothing more. Of course. But his slight smile suggested he knew better. Though I have to admit, I'm curious why you chose this place. It's not exactly where I expected to find myself this morning. Good. The last thing I need is someone recognizing us together. He leaned forward slightly, and she caught that same expensive cologne from his office, subtle but unmistakably masculine. Are you worried about your reputation or mine? Both. The admission slipped out before she could stop it, and she saw something flicker in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. Ava. Her name on his lips was soft, intimate. May I call you Ava? She nodded, not trusting her voice. I want you to know that what I'm doing for Emma, it's not conditional on anything from you. Her case will be handled regardless of what you decide about the story. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. Why would you help someone you don't even know? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee as if it held answers. Because 5 years ago I made a choice that cost 3 people their lives. I told myself it was necessary, that the greater good justified the sacrifice. But those 3 families, they didn't get to choose. Their children didn't get to choose. His voice carried a weight that made her chest tighten. Emma made mistakes, but she doesn't deserve to have her life destroyed for them. Not when I have the power to prevent it. So this is about your guilt, maybe. Or maybe it's about finally doing something right. He looked up, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly undid her. The truth is, I've been waiting for someone like you for years. Someone who would hold me accountable, who would make me face what I've done. And now that you have, now I'm terrified. The admission hung between them, raw and honest, because I realized I don't want to be the man who destroys you to save myself. Ava felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. Ethan, I know what you're thinking. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. The contact sent electricity shooting up her arm. That this is manipulation, that I'm playing some elaborate game. But I need you to know what I feel when I look at you has nothing to do with business. Don't. She pulled her hand away, but the damage was done. The warmth of his touch lingered on her skin like a brand. Don't make this about feelings. Why not? Because it's easier to hate me if you think I'm just another soulless corporate monster. Because it's easier to do what's right if I don't. She stopped, the words catching in her throat. If you don't what? If I don't care about you. The confession escaped before she could stop it, and she saw the impact it had on him, the way his breath caught, the way his eyes darkened. Ava, this is insane. She stood abruptly, needing distance. I'm a journalist. You're my subject. This can't, we can't what? He stood too, moving around the table until he was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Can't feel something real for once in our lives. This isn't real, this is Stockholm Syndrome or something equally twisted, is it? His voice was low, intimate. Because the way you look at me, the way you challenge me, it doesn't feel twisted. It feels like the most honest thing I've experienced in years. The coffee shop around them had faded away. There was only Ethan, standing too close, smelling too good, looking at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. I should go, she whispered. You should, but he made no move to let her pass. But you won't. How do you know? Because you're as tired of being alone as I am. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and despite every instinct screaming at her to run, she leaned into the touch. Because you recognize something in me that matches something in you. What if you're wrong? What if this is just, then we'll deal with whatever comes. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. But I'm not wrong, Ava, and neither are you. She closed her eyes, letting herself have this one moment of weakness. When she opened them, his face was inches from hers, and she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. This is going to ruin everything, she said. I know, we could destroy each other. I know. And you're still what? Still making me want to try. The kiss was inevitable, soft at first, tentative, then deeper as she responded despite herself. His hands framed her face, and she fisted her hands in his sweater, pulling him closer. The coffee shop, the moral complexities, the impossible situation, all of it faded away until there was only this, the taste of him, the way he held her like she was precious, the way her heart hammered against her ribs. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure it out. Together. Together. She almost laughed. We're enemies, remember? No. His forehead rested against hers. We're two people who are tired of fighting battles alone. Outside, the city rushed past in a blur of noise and motion, but inside the quiet corner of Joe's coffee, something shifted. Two people who should have been adversaries had found something neither had expected, a reason to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could rewrite the rules of their own story. Tell us in the comments, have you ever found yourself attracted to someone you knew you should stay away from? What happens when your heart and your head are telling you completely different things? The neutral ground Ethan chose was anything but neutral. The penthouse suite of the Meridian Hotel, 40 floors above the city that had made them both. Ava arrived first, her heels clicking against marble as she surveyed the space that probably cost more per night than most people made in a month. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the sprawling metropolis, but she kept her back to them, unwilling to be awed by his world. "Impressive power play," she said, when Ethan entered, not bothering to look up from the documents spread across the mahogany table. "Neutral ground that happens to be owned by one of your subsidiary companies. I prefer to think of it as convenient." He set down a coffee service that looked expensive enough to fund a small newspaper. "Ethiopian blend. I remembered you mentioned it in your interview with the mayor last year." The fact that he'd read her work and remembered such a detail sent an unwelcome flutter through her chest. She accepted the cup because caffeine was a necessity, not because his thoughtfulness affected her. "Let's get this over with." "Eager to return to your crusade." He took the seat across from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and undoubtedly expensive. "Or are you starting to realize that destroying me might not be as satisfying as you imagined?" "Don't flatter yourself." But her fingers tightened on the cup. 3 days of sleepless nights had taught her that he was right. The satisfaction she'd expected from cornering him had been replaced by something far more complicated. "I'm here because Emma needs that legal trouble to disappear, nothing more. And I'm here because you have the power to destroy everything I've built." He leaned back, studying her with those unsettling dark eyes. "We're both trapped, Miss Chen. We might as well make the best of it." The next 4 hours dissolved into a chess match of words and wills. They negotiated everything: the timeline for her story's burial, the specific charges against Emma that would be dropped, the guarantees that neither would betray the other. But beneath the professional veneer, something else was happening. Every time their fingers brushed over a document, every time their eyes met across the table, the air grew thicker with an awareness neither wanted to acknowledge. "You're not what I expected," Ethan said during a break, watching her pace to the window. The city lights had begun to twinkle as evening approached, and her reflection in the glass looked small and fierce. "What did you expect? Some naive reporter you could intimidate with your money and connections?" "I expected someone who saw the world in black and white." He joined her at the window close enough that she could feel the heat from his body. "Someone who wouldn't understand that sometimes good people make impossible choices." Ava turned to face him, tilting her head back to meet his gaze. "Is that what you tell yourself? That you're a good person who made impossible choices? Aren't you?" The question hit like a physical blow. "You're here negotiating with the enemy to save your sister. How is that different from what I did?" "Because I'm not hiding behind layers of corporate structure and charitable donations." But even as she said it, she felt the sting of hypocrisy. She was hiding behind her righteous anger, behind her professional duty, behind the walls she'd built to protect herself from exactly this kind of complication. "No," he agreed, his voice dropping to something dangerously intimate. "You're hiding behind that armor of moral superiority you wear so well. But I see you, Ava. I see the woman who's been carrying guilt about her sister for months, who takes on crusades because it's easier than facing her own pain." The use of her first name was like a match to gasoline. "You don't know anything about me. I know you haven't had a serious relationship in 3 years. I know you work 16-hour days because silence makes you think too much. I know you blame yourself for Emma's mistakes because you couldn't save her from making them." He stepped closer, and she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. "I know because I recognize it. We're the same, you and I. We're both running from guilt we can't escape. We are nothing alike." But her voice lacked conviction, and they both knew it. "Then why haven't you published the story yet?" He reached up, almost touching her face before dropping his hand. "You've had the evidence for a week. What are you waiting for?" The question hung between them like a challenge, and Ava realized she didn't have an answer. She'd told herself it was about Emma, about timing, about building an airtight case. But standing here in the golden glow of the hotel suite, with Ethan's intensity focused entirely on her, she wondered if she'd been lying to herself. "The story will run," she said finally, "when I'm ready." "And when will that be?" He moved closer still, until she could count his eyelashes. "When you've figured out how to destroy me without destroying yourself in the process." The accusation hit too close to home. Because he was right, somewhere in the past week, The lines had blurred. She'd started seeing him as more than a target, and that terrified her more than any threat he could make. "I think we're done for tonight," she said, stepping back from the dangerous pull of his presence. "I'll review the terms and get back to you, Ava." Her name on his lips stopped her at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About Emma, about all of it. You shouldn't have to choose between your principles and your family." The apology was unexpected, and it cracked something inside her chest. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't make this harder than it already is. What if I don't want to make it easier?" He crossed the room to her, and this time when he reached for her face, she didn't pull away. His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "What if I want to make it impossible?" For a moment she let herself lean into his touch, let herself imagine what it would be like to stop fighting and just feel. But then Emma's face flashed through her mind, and she remembered why she was here. "This doesn't change anything," she said, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "We're still enemies. Are we?" His smile was soft and dangerous, because it feels like something else entirely. She left without answering, but as the elevator carried her down to the real world, she knew he was right. They had become something else, something that made the compromise between them feel less like a business arrangement and more like a dance on the edge of a cliff. The question was whether they would pull each other back from the brink or fall together into something that could destroy them both. "What do you think? Should Ava trust her instincts and walk away from this dangerous game, or is she right to sense that Ethan might be worth the risk?" Have you ever found yourself in a situation where doing the right thing felt wrong, and following your heart seemed like the only real choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The call came at 2:47 a.m., jarring Ava from restless sleep. Emma's voice, thick with tears and panic, cut through the darkness like a blade. "Ava, I need to tell you something, about the charges, about why I really got involved with those people." Her sister's words tumbled out in a rush. "I know you think I'm just irresponsible, but there's more to it. There's always been more to it." Ava sat up in bed, instantly alert. "Emma, what are you talking about?" "The experimental treatment for Mom's cancer 3 years ago, the one that bought her those last 6 months, insurance wouldn't cover it. We were going to lose the house, everything." Emma's voice cracked. "I was 22 and desperate. And when Marcus Webb offered me $50,000 to pass along some information from Dad's construction company, I thought it was harmless corporate espionage." The name hit Ava like a physical blow. Marcus Webb, Ethan's former business partner, the one who'd been conspicuously absent from all her research into Sterling Enterprises. "Emma, what exactly did you do?" "I gave him the structural reports for the Riverside Complex project. I thought it was just about competitive bidding, but..." Emma's sob echoed through the phone. "The building collapsed 6 months later. 12 people died, Ava. 12 people died because I sold information about faulty materials for money to save Mom." Ava's blood ran cold. The Riverside Complex disaster had been the foundation of her investigation into Sterling Enterprises. It was the tragedy that had launched Ethan's company into the spotlight, the government contracts that had made him billions. But if Emma was telling the truth, that's why Marcus can make the charges disappear. Emma continued. "He's been holding this over me for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to use it. And now that you're investigating his former partner, he's decided it's time to clean up loose ends." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Marcus Webb hadn't just been Ethan's partner. He'd been the architect of the tragedy that haunted them both. And Emma had been an unwitting pawn in a game much larger than she'd understood. "I'm coming over," Ava said. But Emma was already spiraling. "You hate me now, don't you? Just like you hated me when I dropped out of college, when I couldn't hold a job, when I made every wrong choice possible. This is just one more disappointment in a long line of..." "Emma, stop." Ava's voice was firm but gentle. "I don't hate you. I never hated you. I was scared. Scared of losing you the way we lost Mom and Dad." 20 minutes later, Ava sat in Emma's tiny apartment, holding her sister as she cried. The story that emerged was more devastating than anything she'd uncovered in her investigation. Emma had been manipulated, used and then discarded by Marcus Webb, who had systematically destroyed her life to maintain his leverage. "I wanted to tell you," Emma whispered, "but I was so ashamed. And then when you started investigating Sterling Enterprises, I thought maybe you'd find out the truth about Marcus, about what really happened. Why didn't you tell me about the connection to my investigation?" "Because I was terrified you'd think I was trying to manipulate you too." Emma pulled back, meeting Ava's eyes. "And because I was afraid that if you knew the truth you'd go after Marcus, and he'd destroy you too." The next morning, Ava found herself doing something she'd never imagined, calling Ethan Sterling directly. Not to threaten or negotiate, but to ask for help. "I need to see you," she said when he answered on the second ring. "There's something you need to know about Marcus Webb." They met at a small cafe in Chinatown, far from the gleaming towers of corporate Manhattan. Ethan arrived looking haggard, as if he'd slept as poorly as she had. When she told him about Emma's confession, she watched his face transform from confusion to recognition, to something that looked like relief. "I knew it," he said quietly. "I always knew Marcus was involved somehow, but I could never prove it." "What do you mean?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with 3 years of suppressed grief. "The night before the Riverside inspection, Marcus convinced me to attend a charity gala instead of reviewing the structural reports myself. He said it was important for company image, that the reports were routine anyway." His hands tightened around the cup. "I trusted him. I'd trusted him since college, and he used that trust to make me complicit in mass murder. But you didn't know, didn't I?" Ethan's laugh was bitter. "I was the CEO. Those were my buildings, my responsibility. When 12 people died, I inherited the government contracts that should have been canceled. I built my empire on their graves, Ava. Every dollar I've made since then has been blood money." The pain in his voice was so raw, so genuine, that Ava felt her last defenses crumble. This wasn't the calculating billionaire she'd expected to expose. This was a man who'd been carrying guilt and grief for 3 years, who'd built his fortune on a foundation of tragedy he'd been powerless to prevent. "That's why you've been so generous with your charitable donations," she realized. "You're trying to balance the scales. 12 families lost everything because of my negligence. No amount of money can bring them back, but I can try to make sure their children have futures." He looked up at her, and she saw the weight of his guilt in his eyes. "I've been waiting for someone like you to expose me. Part of me hoped you would." And Marcus disappeared after the investigation concluded, took his share of the profits and vanished. "I've been trying to find him ever since, but he's been careful to stay in the shadows." Ethan's expression hardened. "Until now. Using your sister was a mistake. It's given us a connection we can trace." The revelation changed everything. They weren't just enemies forced into an uncomfortable alliance. They were 2 people who'd been manipulated by the same man, who'd been carrying similar burdens of guilt and responsibility. Emma's confession had lifted a weight from Ava's shoulders. She hadn't realized she'd been carrying, and she could see it had done the same for Ethan. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "Now we stop running from our guilt and start fighting back." Ethan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Together. The touch sent electricity through her, but this time she didn't pull away. For the first time in 3 years she didn't feel alone in her guilt. And for the first time since she'd walked into his office, she saw Ethan Sterling not as her enemy, but as someone who might understand the weight she'd been carrying. Together she agreed, and wondered if they were talking about more than just Marcus Webb. "What do you think? Now that Ava and Ethan have shared their deepest secrets and discovered they're both victims of Marcus's manipulation, can they truly trust each other? Or do you think there are still more secrets waiting to be revealed? Have you ever had a moment where learning someone's truth completely changed how you saw them?" Share your thoughts in the comments below. The call came at 6:15 a.m. just as Ava was reviewing the Marcus Webb files for the third time that week. Ethan's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Emma's in the hospital, St. Mary's Center, room 314. You need to come now." The line went dead before she could ask questions. Ava's blood turned to ice as she grabbed her keys and raced through the empty morning streets, her mind conjuring every possible disaster. Car accident, overdose, suicide attempt. The guilt she'd been carrying for years crystallized into pure terror. She found Ethan in the ICU waiting room, still in yesterday's clothes, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. He looked up when she burst through the doors, and she saw her own fear reflected in his eyes. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Allergic reaction to her anxiety medication. She mixed it with something else. Alcohol, maybe other pills. I don't know." He stood reaching for her, but she stepped back. "How do you even know about this? Why did they call you?" "Because I'm the one who's been paying for her treatment." His admission hung between them like a confession. "The rehab center, the therapy, the legal fees. I've been covering everything for the past 2 weeks." "You've been what?" Ava's voice rose, drawing stares from other families in the waiting room. "You had no right." "I had every right." Ethan's composure finally cracked. "You think I don't know what it's like to watch someone you love destroy themselves? To feel helpless while they spiral further and further away from you?" The raw pain in his voice stopped her cold. This wasn't about power or control. This was about something deeper, something that had carved itself into his soul long before he'd ever met her. "My brother," he said quietly, sinking back into the plastic chair. "Daniel. He was 2 years younger than me, and he was everything I wasn't. Creative, spontaneous, full of life. When our parents died in that car accident, I was 22 and suddenly responsible for everything. The family business, the house, him." Ava slowly took the seat beside him, her anger dissolving into something softer. "What happened to him?" "I failed him." Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "I was so focused on keeping the business afloat, on being responsible, that I didn't see how much he was struggling. The parties, the drinking, the reckless behavior. I thought he was just being young. By the time I realized it was self-medication for his grief, it was too late." "Ethan, he died 3 years ago, overdose. The same week the Riverside complex collapsed." His laugh was hollow and broken. "I lost my brother and 12 innocent people in the span of 7 days. That's when I knew I was cursed to destroy everything I touched." The pieces of his story clicked into place with devastating clarity. The guilt, the isolation, the desperate need to save everyone around him. It all made sense now. He wasn't the cold, calculating billionaire she'd imagined. He was a man drowning in grief and guilt, trying to save others because he couldn't save the person who mattered most. "That's why you're helping Emma," she realized. "You see Daniel in her, I see you in me," he corrected, meeting her eyes. "The older sibling who blames themselves for not being enough. The one who carries the weight of every mistake their loved one makes." The truth hit her like a physical blow. She had been carrying that weight, had been suffocating under the responsibility of being Emma's guardian, protector, and conscience. She'd been so focused on saving her sister that she'd forgotten to save herself. "I don't know how to stop," she admitted, tears she'd been holding back for months finally spilling over. "I don't know how to love her without trying to control her." "You don't," Ethan said gently, moving closer. "You just love her anyway, even when she makes choices that terrify you. Even when she breaks your heart, you love her because she's worth loving, not because you can save her." When he pulled her into his arms, she didn't resist. She let herself collapse against his chest, let herself feel the warmth of another person who understood the particular hell of loving someone who was determined to self-destruct. His hand stroked her hair, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his shirt, "for everything, for hunting you, for judging you, for thinking I knew who you were." "I'm sorry too," he murmured, "for the blackmail, for putting you in an impossible position, for being too much of a coward to trust you with the truth from the beginning." They held each other in the sterile hospital hallway, two broken people finding solace in shared understanding. When the doctor finally emerged with news that Emma was stable, they faced him together, united in their relief and determination. Later, as they sat beside Emma's bed watching her sleep, Ava felt something shift inside her chest. The walls she'd built around her heart, the armor she'd worn for so long, were crumbling. And for the first time since her parents' death, she wasn't afraid of being vulnerable. "When this is over," she said quietly, "when we've dealt with Marcus and the legal mess and everything else, what happens to us?" Ethan's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know I don't want to go back to being strangers. I know I don't want to pretend this connection doesn't exist. It scares me," she confessed. "This feeling, you scare me." "Good," he said, bringing her hand to his lips. "You scare me too, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." Emma stirred in the bed, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw them together, her lips curved in a weak smile. Finally she whispered, "I was wondering when you two would stop pretending to hate each other." "We never hated each other," Ava said, surprised by the truth of it. "We just didn't know how to stop fighting long enough to see what was underneath." "And what's underneath?" Emma asked, her voice gaining strength. Ava looked at Ethan, saw the future they could build together reflected in his eyes. "Everything," she said simply. "Absolutely everything." As the sun rose over the city, painting the hospital room in golden light, Ava realized that sometimes the most beautiful things grew from the darkest soil. Their love had been forged in conflict, tempered by shared pain, and strengthened by mutual understanding. It wasn't the fairy tale she'd dreamed of as a girl, but it was real, and it was theirs. And for the first time in her life that felt like enough. What do you think? Are Ava and Ethan moving too fast? Or is trauma bonding sometimes the foundation of the deepest connections? Do you believe that sharing your darkest moments with someone can actually strengthen a relationship, or does it create an unhealthy dependency? Have you ever found love in the most unexpected circumstances? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The photograph arrived at Ava's apartment at 9:47 p.m., slipped under her door while she was on the phone with Ethan, planning their next move against Marcus Webb. The image stopped her heart. Ethan, 3 years younger, shaking hands with Marcus outside the Riverside Complex construction site, both men smiling as they stood beside a sign reading Webb Sterling Partnership, Building Tomorrow. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email. The truth about your boyfriend's lies." A friend. The email contained a treasure trove of documents that painted a devastating picture. Corporate records showing Ethan as an equal partner in the original Riverside project. Financial statements revealing he'd profited massively from the government contracts awarded after the collapse. Most damning of all, a recorded conversation between Ethan and Marcus dated just 6 months ago. Ethan's voice came through her laptop speakers, cold and calculating. "The Chen situation is becoming problematic. The sister is useful leverage, but if the journalist gets too close to the truth about our arrangement..." Marcus's reply chilled her blood. "Don't worry. I have contingencies in place. Emma Chen's legal troubles are just the beginning. By the time I'm done, both sisters will be too busy surviving to threaten us." "Good. Make sure it stays that way. I didn't build this empire to watch it crumble because of some idealistic reporter." Ava's hands shook as she played the recording again, each word driving deeper into her chest like a knife. Everything, the hospital vigil, the shared confessions, the gentle way he'd held her, it had all been an elaborate manipulation. She'd been so desperate to believe in him, to believe in them, that she'd ignored every red flag. Her phone rang. Ethan's name on the screen made her stomach lurch. "Ava, I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about us taking things slow. You bastard." Her voice was deadly quiet. "You lying, manipulative bastard." Silence stretched between them. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. "What are you talking about?" "The recording, Ethan. The one where you and Marcus discuss how to handle the Chen situation. Was I ever anything more than a problem to be managed? Ava, listen to me carefully. Whatever you think you've heard, I heard enough. She was screaming now, months of suppressed anger erupting. I heard you talking about using Emma as leverage. I heard you were planning to destroy us both if we got too close to the truth. Was any of it real? The hospital, your brother, the way you held me when I cried. Every word about Daniel was true. My feelings for you are real. But that recording, stop lying to me. Tears streamed down her face. I've seen the partnership documents. I know you were working with Marcus the whole time. This whole thing, the compromise, the negotiations, even Emma's arrest, it was all orchestrated, wasn't it? You needed a way to control me, so you created a crisis you could solve. That's not Ava. You have to let me explain.
Explain what? How you played me. How you used my love for my sister to manipulate me into bed with you. The words tasted like poison. God, I'm such an idiot. I actually believed you were different. I believed you cared about me. I do care about you, more than I've ever cared about anyone. Ethan's voice cracked. If you'll just let me come over, let me show you the real documents. Don't. Ava's voice was hollow now, emptied of everything but exhaustion. Don't come here. Don't call me. Don't contact Emma. Whatever game you and Marcus are playing, I'm done being a pawn. She hung up and immediately called her editor. Richard, it's Ava. I need to move up the Sterling Enterprises story. How quickly can we get it to print? Ava, it's almost 10 p.m. What's the rush? The rush is that I just discovered the subject of my investigation has been playing me for a fool, and I'm going to make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of man Ethan Sterling really is. 3 hours later, her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. What did you do? Marcus just called. He says the deal is off, the charges are back on the table, and he's adding new ones. Ava, what's happening? The trap had been sprung perfectly. By moving against Ethan, she'd triggered Marcus's contingency plan. Emma would pay the price for her sister's defiance, just as Marcus had planned all along. The recording had been bait, and she'd taken it completely. Another text, this one from Ethan. The recording is fake. Audio manipulation technology. I can prove it, but only if you'll listen. Marcus is using your anger against both of us. Please don't let him win. But Ava was beyond listening. She'd opened her heart to someone who'd played her like a violin, who'd used her deepest fears and greatest love against her. The betrayal cut deeper than any professional disappointment ever could, because it wasn't just about the story anymore. It was about the future she'd allowed herself to imagine, the love she'd thought was real. She typed back, "Prove it to the judge. I'm done believing anything you say." The story went live at 6 a.m., splashed across the front page of the Herald with a headline that would end Ethan's career, "Billionaire's Blood Money. How Sterling Enterprises Built an Empire on Tragedy and Lies." By 7 a.m., her phone was ringing off the hook with interview requests. By 8 a.m., Sterling Enterprises stock had plummeted 30%. By 9 a.m., federal investigators were issuing subpoenas, and by 10 a.m., Ava was staring at a legal document that made her blood run cold. Emma had been arrested again, this time on federal charges that carried a minimum sentence of 15 years. The note attached was written in Marcus's familiar handwriting. "You should have stayed bought, now you'll both pay the price." She'd wanted to destroy Ethan Sterling, and she'd succeeded. But in doing so she'd destroyed herself and Emma too. The compromise that had started this whole mess was nothing compared to the choice she faced now: watch her sister go to prison for decades, or find a way to trust the man she'd just publicly eviscerated. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to choose justice over love, she'd chosen neither. She'd chosen revenge, and revenge, she was learning, was a poison that destroyed everything it touched. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. "Game over. You lose, both of you." Maybe for the first time since this all began, Ava Chen had no plan, no strategy, no way forward. She'd burned the only bridge that might have led to salvation, and now she was drowning in the ashes of her own making. What do you think? Was Ava right to trust the evidence and protect herself from further manipulation, or did she fall into Marcus's trap by letting her hurt override her judgment? When someone you love betrays you or appears to, is it ever worth giving them a chance to explain, or is self-preservation the only smart choice? Have you ever had to choose between protecting your heart and protecting someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Ava stared at the legal documents spread across her kitchen table, each page a death sentence for Emma's future. 15 years minimum for conspiracy, fraud and racketeering. The federal charges were ironclad, built on evidence that Marcus had been collecting for years. Her sister's life was over, and it was entirely her fault. The apartment felt suffocating. Empty coffee cups and crumpled tissues littered every surface. She hadn't slept in 36 hours, hadn't eaten in longer than that. The phone had stopped ringing after she'd turned it off, unable to bear another interview request about her heroic exposé of Ethan Sterling. Heroic, the word made her sick. A soft knock at her door made her freeze. She'd been ignoring visitors for 2 days, but this knock was different. Patient, gentle, familiar. Ava's voice was muffled through the wood. I know you don't want to see me, but Emma's running out of time and I think I know how to help her. She pressed her back against the door, tears streaming down her face. Go away. The recording was fake. I can prove it. I have the original audio files, the technical analysis, everything. But more importantly, I know where Marcus is hiding. Despite herself, Ava's breath caught. It doesn't matter. Even if the recording was fake, the partnership documents are real. I was Marcus's partner 3 years ago. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not going to lie about it anymore. His voice was raw with exhaustion. I was young, desperate, and stupid. I trusted someone I shouldn't have trusted. But I never knew about the faulty materials, never knew about the collapse. And I've spent 3 years trying to make amends for my negligence. Ava slid down the door until she was sitting on the floor. Why should I believe you? Because I'm about to lose everything, and I'm still here. Because I could have disappeared like Marcus did, taken my money and vanished. Because I'm standing outside your door begging you to trust me one more time, even though you've already destroyed my life. The pain in his voice was unbearable. She opened the door without thinking, and the sight of him nearly broke her heart all over again. His usually perfect appearance was shattered, stubble, wrinkled clothes, eyes red with exhaustion and grief. Ava, he breathed her name like a prayer. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't honest from the beginning. I'm sorry I let my pride and fear keep me from trusting you with the whole truth. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to choose between your principles and your heart. I ruined everything, she whispered. Emma's going to prison because I was too proud to listen, too hurt to think clearly. I destroyed you, I destroyed us, and for what? Justice. There's no justice in any of this. There could be. He stepped closer and she didn't retreat. If we work together, if we stop letting Marcus win by turning us against each other. How? The story's already out. The federal investigation has started. Your company's stock is worthless. Even if I wanted to help you, I've burnt every bridge. Not every bridge. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. This contains everything. The real financial records, the communication logs, and the evidence that Marcus orchestrated everything from the beginning. He's been playing a long game, Ava. The Riverside collapse was just the opening move. She stared at the drive like it was a bomb. Why didn't you show me this before? Because I was a coward. Because I was afraid that even the truth wouldn't be enough to make you trust me. Because I'd rather have you hate me for the wrong reasons than hate me for the right ones. His laugh was bitter. Turns out you hated me anyway. I don't hate you. The admission escaped before she could stop it. I wanted to. God, I tried so hard to hate you, but I can't. Even now, even after everything, I can't. Then help me save Emma. Help me stop Marcus before he destroys anyone else. And if we manage to save ourselves in the process, maybe we can figure out how to trust each other again." Ava looked at the flash drive, then at Ethan's face. This was the moment. The choice that would define the rest of her life. She could take the safe path, refuse to trust him, let Emma face the consequences of her own actions, and try to rebuild her career from the ashes of this disaster. Or she could take the leap of faith that terrified her most, believing that love was worth fighting for, even when it seemed impossible. "What do you need me to do?" Relief flooded Ethan's features. "I need you to trust me, completely. And I need you to be willing to risk everything one more time." "I already lost everything." "No," he said, reaching for her hand. "You lost your illusions. You lost your certainty. You lost your safety net. But you didn't lose what matters most." "What's that?" "Your capacity to love. Your willingness to fight for the people you care about. Your ability to see past the surface to the truth underneath." His thumb traced across her knuckles. "That's what I fell in love with, Ava. Not the fearless reporter, not the moral crusader. The woman who would sacrifice everything for her sister. The woman who opened her heart to someone who didn't deserve it." "You deserved it," she said quietly. "You still deserve it. I'm the one who threw it away. Then let's both stop throwing things away and start building something instead." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her palm. "Let's choose each other. Let's choose love over fear, trust over safety, and together over alone." She thought about Emma, alone in a federal holding cell facing a future that looked like concrete walls and iron bars. She thought about the 12 families who'd lost loved ones in the Riverside collapse, who deserved to know the truth about what had really happened. She thought about herself, standing at the crossroads between the woman she'd been and the woman she could become. "Okay," she said, and the word felt like jumping off a cliff. "But if you're lying to me, if this is another manipulation, then you'll destroy me again and I'll deserve it." He pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in days she felt like she could breathe. "But I'm not lying. I'm done lying. I'm done being afraid of losing you, because I already lost you once, and it nearly killed me." "You didn't lose me," she murmured against his chest. "I lost myself. But maybe we can find our way back to each other. Maybe we can find our way to something better than we were before." As they stood in her doorway, holding each other in the wreckage of their mistakes, Ava realized that love wasn't about choosing the safe path. It was about choosing the person you couldn't imagine living without, even when that choice scared you senseless. It was about believing that two broken people could heal each other, that trust could be rebuilt stronger than it was before. It was about taking the leap and trusting that the person you loved would catch you. "So what's the plan?" she asked, pulling back to look at him. Ethan's smile was dangerous and full of promise. "We're going to give Marcus Webb exactly what he deserves. And then we're going to build something beautiful from the ruins of what he tried to destroy. What do you think? Should Ava trust Ethan again after everything that's happened, or is she setting herself up for another devastating betrayal? When someone you love makes a mistake that hurts you deeply, is it possible to rebuild trust, or are some bridges burned forever? Have you ever had to choose between protecting your heart and fighting for someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The confrontation with Marcus Webb took place in the one location he'd never expected them to find him. The penthouse office of his shell company, hidden behind layers of corporate structures in downtown Manhattan. Ava and Ethan had spent 48 hours following digital breadcrumbs, tracing financial records, and coordinating with federal investigators who were suddenly very interested in reopening the Riverside complex case. Marcus was waiting for them, standing behind his desk with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. At 52, he was still handsome in a silver fox way, but 3 years of hiding had carved cruel lines around his eyes. "Ethan, Miss Chen," He gestured to the chairs across from his desk as if they were old friends. I have to admit, I'm impressed. I didn't think you had it in you to work together, especially after that delicious little recording I had fabricated. We know it was fake, Ava said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The audio analysis proves it, does it? Marcus smiled. Because I have to tell you, the technology these days is remarkable. Soon we'll live in a world where no one can trust anything they hear or see. Rather poetic, don't you think? What do you want, Marcus? Ethan's voice was cold, controlled. What's the endgame here? Justice. Marcus moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city below. Do you know what it's like to watch your best friend get everything you deserve? To watch him build an empire on the foundation of your ideas, your work, your vision. Those weren't your ideas, Ethan said quietly. You stole the structural modifications from your own engineering team, and then blamed them when the building collapsed. I made one mistake. Marcus whirled around, his composure finally cracking. One miscalculation in load-bearing capacity. But you got to be the grieving CEO, the reformed billionaire, the man who learned from tragedy. You got the government contracts, the public sympathy, the chance to rebuild. What did I get? Exile. Hiding. Watching from the shadows while you became a hero. 12 people died because of your mistake, Ava said, her journalistic instincts taking over. 12 families destroyed, and you've spent 3 years making more victims instead of taking responsibility. Responsibility? Marcus laughed bitterly. I've been taking responsibility. I've been evening the scales. Ava Chen was just collateral damage in a much larger equation. Ava Chen is a woman whose life you destroyed for revenge, Ethan said, moving protectively closer to Ava. Just like you destroyed those families 3 years ago, and just like I'm about to destroy both of you. The threat hung in the air like a blade. But Marcus had underestimated one crucial thing. Ava and Ethan weren't the same broken people who'd started this journey weeks ago. They'd been forged in fire, tempered by loss, and strengthened by the choice to trust each other completely. Actually, Ava said, pulling out her phone, I think you're the one who's about to be destroyed. She pressed play on the recording app that had been running since they'd entered the office. Marcus's confession, his admission of guilt in the Riverside collapse, his manipulation of Emma, his fabrication of evidence, played back in crystal clear quality. You see, Marcus, I learned something important recently, she continued as his face went pale. Sometimes the best way to catch a predator is to give them exactly what they want, an audience for their superiority complex. That recording is inadmissible. You didn't have my consent. We didn't need it. Ethan stepped forward, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who'd reclaimed his power. Because we weren't the only ones listening. The office doors opened, and 3 federal agents entered, led by Agent Sarah Martinez, who'd been coordinating with them for the past 2 days. Behind them came a figure that made Ava's heart leap. Emma, looking pale but determined, flanked by the best legal team money could buy. Marcus Webb, Agent Martinez said, producing handcuffs. You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, and accessory to 12 counts of negligent homicide. The next hour passed in a blur of legal proceedings, statements, and the profound relief of watching Marcus finally face the consequences of his actions. Emma's charges were dropped entirely, the fabricated evidence dismissed, and her record cleared. The Riverside families would finally have the truth, and more importantly, they'd have justice. 6 months later, Ava stood in the garden of Ethan's estate, watching her sister laugh with genuine joy for the first time in years. Emma was 6 months clean, working as a counselor at a recovery center that Ethan had funded, and planning her wedding to the social worker she'd met in group therapy. Penny, for your thoughts. Ethan's arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back against his solid warmth. Just thinking about compromise, she said,
turning in his arms. How we started this whole thing thinking it was about giving up something we wanted. But really it was about finding something we didn't even know we needed. And what's that? Each other. Trust. The courage to be vulnerable. She traced the line of his jaw, still amazed that she got to touch him like this. The knowledge that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone worth fighting for. Speaking of fighting for something, Ethan dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring box that made her breath catch. Ava Chen, will you marry me? Will you compromise with me for the rest of our lives? The diamond was beautiful, but not as beautiful as the hope in his eyes, the vulnerability he was showing her. This wasn't the powerful billionaire, or the guilt-ridden recluse. This was just Ethan, the man who'd held her while she cried, who'd fought beside her when everything seemed hopeless, who'd chosen her over his own safety. Yes, she said, laughing through her tears. Yes to all of it. The compromise, the fighting, the loving, the whole messy, beautiful future we're going to build together. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with the passion of a man who'd almost lost everything and found it again. Around them their friends and family cheered, but Ava barely heard them. She was too busy memorizing this moment, this perfect, imperfect beginning. Later, after the celebration had died down and the guests had gone home, they sat on the terrace overlooking the city lights. Emma was curled up in a chair nearby, finally at peace, while Ethan's arm wrapped around Ava's shoulders. Do you think we would have found each other if none of this had happened? Ava asked. If Marcus hadn't forced us together, I think we would have found each other eventually, Ethan said, pressing a kiss to her temple. But we might have been too scared to trust what we found. Sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances. The billionaire's compromise, she mused. Who would have thought that blackmail and mutual destruction would lead to this? Not blackmail, Ethan corrected gently. Partnership. From the very beginning we were partners. We just didn't know it yet. Ava looked at her ring, catching the city lights in its facets. She thought about the story she'd write someday, the one about how two enemies became lovers, how compromise became the foundation of trust, how love emerged from the ashes of betrayal. It wouldn't be the fairy tale she'd dreamed of as a little girl. It would be better. It would be real. I love you, she said simply. I love our complicated, messy, impossible love. I love you too, he replied. And I love that we chose each other every day, despite everything. Even when I destroyed your company and nearly sent you to prison. Especially then, he said, pulling her closer, because that's when I knew for certain that you were worth fighting for. As the city sparkled below them and the future stretched ahead with all its promise and uncertainty, Ava realized that sometimes the greatest victories came from surrendering to love. The billionaire's compromise had cost them everything they thought they wanted, but it had given them everything they needed: each other, trust, and the unshakable knowledge that some loves are worth any price. What do you think? Did Ava and Ethan earn their happy ending, or do you think they moved too fast from enemies to lovers? Can a relationship built on such intense conflict really last, or is their love strong enough to weather any storm? Have you ever found that your greatest challenges led to your greatest blessings? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know what you'd like to see from these characters next.
You've reached the end, but our love story is only just beginning. The next chapter will be more passionate, more dangerous, and far more intoxicating than anything you've heard so far. Until then, guard your heart, because in the Powder Room Tales, every billionaire has a secret, and every love comes with a price.